Welcome to Grow Your Power, offering skills and experiences of homesteading for anyone, anywhere who wants to save money, gain independence, and maybe get a little down and dirty. And I'm your host, Anne Greenfield. I fell in love with a goat probably 45 years ago when I happened to meet the eyes of one goat in one pen somewhere. Her communication to me seemed so intelligent from her eyes. I fell in love with the whole goat species at that point, and I wanted one to raise. In 1973, I purchased one wonderful, delightful baby goat. I loved watching her frolicking, climbing on top of my clothes on top of a wagon and jumping over things and climbing on my friend's car even. And she would eat on the bark of my husband's apple trees. And so my life got kind of crazy, and it just wasn't the good time for having goats. And I turned away from goat husbandry for a while. What brought me back to goats was my desire to grow all my own food. In my recent shows, I've talked about being able to grow some or all of our vegetables. I then shared my experiences in growing different staple crops like potatoes, field corn, beans, and grain. You can find these shows on my Facebook page, Grow Your Power. As for raising livestock, I've talked about raising chickens, and today I'd like to talk about goat husbandry and raising pigs. After a few years of growing all my vegetables and my staples, I was still shopping at the store for a few things, like coffee and some spices and milk to make yogurt. So I thought, I'll just get goats and then I will have my own milk for making yogurt, and I can make cheese and whatever. So that's when I decided to get these 2 goats. Goats are naturally herd animals. You should have at least 2 goats. They like the company, and they like to play and butt each other. So the day arrived when a long red trailer pulled in and had my new goats for me. I was so excited. I had purchased 2 Toggenburg mamas, which were going to be delivered as soon as they had given birth. So one by one they came out of the trailer and followed their owner to my pens, and there were 2 mamas and 4 babies. I had just gotten a family of 6 goats, which turned out to be rather a sweet family, but I was feeling a bit overwhelmed at first. Goats do not need a lot of shelter. They're native to cold, high plateaus or mountains. But they do not like rain, and they don't like a lot of sun. I built some 3-sided pallet sheds and later a 3-sided plywood shed for them. Tin roofing works great. These sheds don't have to be large at all. 6 by 10 would house 3 adults and a couple babies for me. I was interested to see that the goats almost always would sleep out in the open pen, and only when it rained would they hunker together in their shed. I had planned to feed my goats just what they could forage. I lived on acres of forest and pasture, plenty of greens for them. If I didn't have to buy feed for them, that would be more my idea of a self-sustaining homestead, which is what I was after. But I read the books, and the book said to feed grain for a good quantity milk production. I'm still not sure if this is necessary or not. My mama goats were tethered up to great forage every day. Blackberries, poison oak shrub, and oak trees. These are their favorite foods. Then I would feed grain in their stanchion when I milked them, and I'd give them a little alfalfa in the evenings to lure them back from pasture into their night-safe pens. If you are going to feed a commercial goat feed, do be careful. Many animal feeds are based on soybeans because soy, being really high in protein, quickens growth and milk production. However, the animals burn out faster. I've heard that in cow dairies it's a benefit economically to have a high quantity milk production for a few years and then to discard the cow. Sell, slaughter. And GMO infusion into our grains these days should also make us question what we are feeding. My choice was buying the separate organic grains of oats, barley, and corn and mixing them when I fed. Perhaps you can compensate yourself for buying feed, as I did, by selling milk and cheeses at your local stores or farmer markets. I was able to earn back at least the costs of my goat husbandry, and it was actually satisfying to have something of quality to give to others, not just to myself, and also the chance to network with other farmers. Alfalfa hay or alfalfa pellets are a high-protein food for goats, and if you do not have healthy forage for them, then hay will be necessary. Orchard hay or rye grass may work. I personally don't know the quality of its protein. Please research what pesticides have been used on the hay if it is not sold as organic. Goats, wonderful half-wild animals. They really like the routines, a consistent milking time and procedure, the routine walk out to pasture, the bit of alfalfa in their pen, and then, like humans, I believe, too much routine and they want to do something differently. And they may do something completely unexpected, like climb out of their fence or refuse to follow their leader. Fencing. 16-foot long hog panels, as they're called, create a nice sturdy fence, and at about 4 feet high on level ground will hold the goats, probably. I found that on a downslope, my one most intelligent and mischievous goat was able to climb the 4 foot up the fence and over, as a cat might do. Some goats, if they grow up learning to fence jump, they will always be a fence jumper. And if in the goat pens there are any trees with the slightest angle of bend, the goats will run up 12 foot high, especially the sprightly baby goats. But otherwise, you can probably fence goats into a pen. I do hope your goats don't have to stay in their pen all the time, though. Plenty of folks do raise goats in pens, but personally, I feel sad when I see these penned animals. In contrast, I delight in seeing goats, or any animals really, who are able to enjoy their natural selves in a natural landscape with natural foods to eat, and they're keeping active all day finding their food and playing in the company of their herd, their own kind, their flock, their gaggle. I so empathized with my goats that even when out walking by myself, I would get excited to see a site lush with forage, thinking how much my goats would enjoy it. But as a compromise, with a small yard perhaps, you can start with a small electrically charged fence, which you can move around, giving the goats fresh grazing or browsing every week. If they must permanently stay in a pen, you can bring them daily greens, branches, vegetables. Keeping their food off the ground is important. Goats are very meticulous. They don't like eating off the ground especially, and if it is littered with their scat, they won't eat. Even when pasture grasses are their only food, they don't nibble it low, as sheep do. Goats are browsers, they're not grazers, and they prefer food at brush height. Tethering goats. Tethering is not always the safest situation for goats, but it can be done, and at least they can be out in the daytime amongst their favorite plants, browsing in enjoyable fashion. I tethered each of my mama goats on maybe 25 feet of rope, and far enough from each other not to have them tangle. Baby goats would stay quite close to their mamas, even when they became mamas themselves. I practiced tethering for about 7 years. I would walk out to check my goats and ropes once or twice a day. I did have 2 serious crises in those years with tangled goats. Thankfully, they ended well. Water for goats. Yes, it's good to have pails of fresh water for your goats, but don't be surprised if they don't drink very much. Goats are drought tolerant, second only to camels. Strangely, when I would walk my goats down the dirt roads to some tethering spot, they would drink from the puddles in the middle of the road, while having left the fresh water at home untouched. Go figure. I find every goat wonderfully unique. I think every little herd is different. My goats wouldn't eat things that other goats loved. Some fencing won't work for every goat, and a goat can be a nuzzler or a terror. And they may follow you as they did me. That was my favorite thing, was that they would follow me wherever I would go, over the pastures, into the forest, up the hills, down the roads. Goat predators. Depending on where you live, you may have to pen your goats at night against predators. Goat predators are mountain lions, coyotes, wolves, dogs. Our pet dogs worked out an amicable relationship with our goats. One, after a traumatic encounter with our goat, was deathly afraid of it and would stay away. But I think the smell of our pet dogs kept predators away from the pens that were close to our house. I didn't have problems in tethering my goats in the daytime, even though I was on a large piece of wilderness land, because I tethered them at the edge of a forest rather than in the thick of it, and tethered them close to the roads. I believe electric fencing will keep predators out and keep goats in. And the hog panels, or regular fencing, will keep out the dog family at least. Mountain lions, yes, they can jump or climb most anything. A task that is part of goat husbandry is trimming hooves. In their natural habitat, goats would keep their hooves shaved by the constant rock they traverse. As we domesticate them, we need to look to their hooves every several months, trimming with a utility knife or actual hoof trimmer, and checking for any foot rot. Brushing goats? Not necessary, but they love it. Both male and female goats have horns and beards, and many goat tenders have the horns removed from a young goat to protect people or other goats. This is done by burning, nipping, or sawing off the horns. I like leaving the horns on to give my goats better defense against predators. If you have male kids born, you should decide by the time they are a month old if you do or do not want a fertile buck around. Male goats can be castrated by an elastrator without excessive pain to the goat. These castrated males are then called wethers and usually have the sweetest of temperaments. They can be great pets or land clearers or pack animals. I'm going to take a musical break, and then I will be back. I'll be talking about pregnancy and birthing, milking and using the milk, making cheese, using the whey. And here is our musical break. This is Tina Vieri, Tinkling Roll the Tin Bits by Henning Gamma. This is about a 5-minute musical break, and I plan to dance and hope you will come dance with me.
Minä muita tunnustelen, barbaarin
Milking a goat. I love milking goats. To have milk from a goat, the goat must give birth. And that means impregnation, and that means access to a buck. You can keep your own buck in a separate pen with its offensive odor away from the milk processing, or you can take your doe when she's in heat to the buck at another farm. Goats transport quite well. I still remember carting my first goat years ago in the back seat of my little red VW Bug. I rather liked the look of astonishment when a passerby would look in my car window and see a goat face. How to deal with the actual birth of the kids. Goats seem to be naturals with this birthing thing. And I've often wondered why the human female most often goes through hours of struggle, pain, and maybe complications in giving birth. When I suspected that my doe was soon to give birth, I would anxiously get my set of directions together for possibly assisting the birth, perhaps having to turn or pull a baby. I would get my sterile gloves, Vaseline, molasses for afterwards, and I would await the signs. And usually I would miss any signs until I heard from a distance one loud extreme bellow, and there would be, plopped on the ground, a small, slightly traumatized, wet kid goat. The mama would lick it, and soon, within an hour, the baby would be on its wobbly feet, butting around the mama, searching for what it instinctively knew was food, somewhere around the mama. Mama, in the meantime, was probably moving a second, third, or fourth baby down and out the birth canal. Goats have a season being fertile for impregnation, or being in heat, it's called. In our temperate climate, that will be every 3 weeks, usually August through February. Timing your goat's visit to a buck for a zesty hour or so is a bit tricky, but it can be done because a goat will stay in heat for maybe 48 hours. And there are signs. The signs that a goat shows when it is in heat can be a clear fluid discharge, a rapidly wagging tail, an increased vocalness, and perhaps a heated temperament. In the United States, goats are commercially bred annually, which means new babies annually and a freshened milk supply annually. In Europe, goats are usually bred only twice in a lifetime. After the second breeding, they would just be continuously milked for several years. And goats can be milked once, twice, or, as I heard of the Russian practice, 3 times a day. Consistency of time is the important thing, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 times a day. Where does one milk a goat? Well, some goats, I've heard, can be milked right out in the field. I've seen goats milked just tied up to a fence. The traditional way, however, is to have a milking stanchion. A milking stanchion can easily be built out of small pieces of lumber with a bit of a rain roof, and it can be set up outside in a fresh air space. You can easily research the different styles of stanchion or come up with your own. And of course, you can get fancy and have a whole room set up for milking. A small amount of grain can be put into a hopper at the front of the stanchion. The goat will jump up to the platform, and her head can be barred into the front next to the hopper. You get to sit on a low stool and squeeze one tit after another, one tit of milk into a pail. I've heard some folks will bring their coffee out to the stanchion and squirt some milk into it for an instant warm cappuccino. I washed and then sterilized my milking equipment in the sun. Make sure you have clean equipment and clean hands. You will need a pail, a funnel, and cheesecloth or a painter's mesh bag, and a dairy thermometer later for making cheese. The goat is milked, the milk strained through cheesecloth, and poured into a sterile container, cooled quickly and refrigerated. And then you can have the sweetest, creamiest, freshest milk possible. Many Ayurvedic practitioners believe raw goat milk to be one of the healthiest foods available. It is naturally homogenized, and dairy experts claim goat milk easier to digest than cow's milk and less prone to produce allergies. So, the gifts from our goat friends: great milk, yogurt, kefir, cheeses, and whey. Yogurt is made off-grid, easy enough. Starting with warm milk 110 degrees, adding a couple tablespoons of a store yogurt to start the fermentation process, and then somehow keeping the covered milk at an even 105 to 110 degrees for about 8 hours. That is the trick. If you have electricity, an actual yogurt maker works well. With no or minimal electricity, one has to be resourceful, and I have heard some great stories. Using an insulated ice chest with the milk yogurt jars stuffed in between pillows. Or heating up a small pressure cooker with a little water in it, then turning it off and quickly adding the pint jars of milk. The covered pressure cooker will hold the heat and transform the milk into yogurt as it sits. I never did make kefir. Cheese. Cheese is simply milk that has been naturally or artificially coagulated, and the whey is then poured off or pressed out. There are many recipes for different cheeses. It's time to experiment and find your favorite. The easiest cheese is made by setting a quart of milk for 1 to 3 days in a warm spot, a kitchen counter, or outside. The best temperature range is 75 to 85 degrees. And you can watch the milk curdling. After it curdles, strain the curds and whey. Sounds like a nursery rhyme, doesn't it? Strain it through cheesecloth. Let it drip a while and voila! Sweet cream cheese. The cheese is in the cloth and the whey is drained out into a mason jar. The whey that has drained out is a valuable product also, and I believe it's underutilized. The whey contains more vitamins, minerals, and enzymes than the cheese. Plus, it is probiotic. It can be drunk just plain. It has a slightly citric taste. Some people hate it, and I love it. A lot of folk will toss the whey or feed it to livestock. However, it is a valuable product for making fermented foods like sauerkraut, pickled carrots, ketchup, and even cherry chutney. Fermentation increases the shelf life of a foodstuff, and it yields the probiotics every time it is eaten. Whey can also be used to marinate meat. Its acid will break down and tenderize the protein fibers. The second easiest cheese to make is a queso blanco or paneer cheese. By heating the milk slowly to 185 degrees, adding lemon juice or vinegar, letting it sit for a short while and then straining out the whey, and you will have a soft, almost ricotta-like cheese. It's delicious. I don't know, however, how many enzymes and nutrients are lost to the cheese or the whey by this high heating of the milk. Hard cheeses were discovered as a way to preserve milk. The process of culturing milk into a cheese, never heating it over 100 or 102 degrees, will kill the bad bacteria, and aging that cheese for 60 days guarantees the cheese to be germ-free. There are recipes for many different kinds of cheese, and they will use a vegetable rennet, a buttermilk, or other kind of bacterial culture. Making a hard cheese is not difficult, and it's not even time-consuming. But it will take a few minutes every day for 5 to 7 days. I'm recommending two very helpful books. The Encyclopedia of Country Living by Carla Emery. This book gives very detailed and varied ways of making yogurt and soft and hard cheeses. The other book is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, Fallon. This book contains information on fermentation and fermentation recipes. Another gift we get from goats is their nutrient-rich manure. It is not as hot as chicken manure, and it can be put directly around plants without composting it first. The first time I took some goat pebbles, their manure, and spread it around some plants, I was struck with the symbiosis of plants and animals. I proclaimed at that point that a homestead needs livestock to be whole. It's another circle of life. Plants feed us, or feed animals. We eat the plants or animals, and then we animals give our leavings back to the earth. And plants thrive on the nutrients of the manure. This circle, unfortunately, does not work usually with human manure. Human manure usually goes into water systems and pollutes them, rather than going into the earth where it can be recycled. Let's take another music break, and I invite you to call in if you have any questions or comments, information about raising goats, or goat antics that you'd like to share for fun, and I know there are many. I will be back to talk about raising pigs, and here is Bob Marley's Stir It Up. Pigs. I've never raised pigs, but I did receive half a pig butchered in a trade with a neighbor. The pig had been raised on surplus organic vegetables, organic spent grain from a distillery, brewery mash, and leftover chaff from hay fed to other animals. That pork cooked up to something sweeter than any pork I'd tasted before. Another neighbor raised 2 pigs from the 25-pound wiener size. He fed them on surplus bread and 25 to 50 gallons of yogurt a week, which he would obtain from a local goat dairy's yogurt processing plant. The neighbor claims that to the pigs, that yogurt was like chocolate cake. They loved it and grew to 300 pounds each in 6 months. Supposedly, some pig breeds are better foragers than others. My friend's pigs would dig blackberry roots out of the ground, yay, and also root out any old cans and bottles left from past decades. I've heard stories of the totally empty, fleshless pumpkin shells left in fields after the pigs have been allowed to come through. Pigs are slow animals. They don't move around much and so gain weight without even a lot of food. An electric fence may be the best fencing for pigs, as they could root themselves under many another fence. Fencing is not to keep predators out, but mostly to keep the pigs in. No predator wants to meet up with a pig after it's 30 pounds or so. The traditional butchering season for pigs is in late autumn. If your homestead contains some apple trees, it's great to have pigs to clean up the fallen mush of apples on the ground, or acorns, or leftover grape harvest. And in late autumn, a slaughtered pig can be dehydrated, cleaned out, and hung for a few days in a cool barn before butchering. Here's an interesting homestead recycling story. A pig, after it's been slaughtered and the hide taken off and the innards removed, the pig hide will still have a layer of fat on it. So the hide can be thrown to the chickens, who will happily peck every bit of fat off of it. Then the hide can be thrown to the dogs, who will fight and tug for it, for it's still quite a tasty toy. And in tribute to those blackberry digging pigs, I'm going to play a song by Blackberry Bush's String Band. It's called Salt Creek. And I want to propose that for my next show, you might think about contributing a story. My theme will be nature and how we connect with it. I wonder, what is the first event you can remember where you felt part of nature, embedded in it, really connected?
One of these days I'm gonna make it down to Salt Creek, baby, to Salt Creek, baby. Sing a hallelujah for all of my ladies that couldn't sing it before. One of these days I'm gonna make it down to Salt Creek, baby, to Salt Creek, baby. Sing a hallelujah for all of my ladies that couldn't sing it before.